all that he does, you will feel as if you're not doing enough. He is the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis. Don't hold your applause, because there's more. The Minister of Finance, National Security, Citizenship and Immigration, Health and Human Resource Management, and Social Security. He does many things and has many hats. He believes in the development of young people and has worked ardently since his acceptance of the office as the 4th Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis to ensure that young people are recognized and provided adequate opportunities to advance themselves. He is a man committed to the growth and development of the people of the Twin Island Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis and the advancement of regional integration and relationships with Africa and its diaspora. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Honorable Dr. Terrance Michael Drew. First term as Prime Minister, you were, however, a medical doctor before getting into politics. What is it that made you decide, I want to enter politics after the important job that you were doing?
Right. First of all, before I get started, let me pay homage to you. You have demonstrated great strength in battling what you had to battle. And you are here in such good spirits. Put your hands together.
You've already managed to make me blush.
Well, how I see medical practice, I see it as an instrument to help fellow human beings. I think that is the foundation. I don't think I've ever worked for a for-profit organization. My contributions have always been to communities, and especially to those who need help the most. Even my own medical practice is to render a lot of free care to those who couldn't afford a medical doctor. And so my extension to politics, I say politics not as a means to have power, but as a means to serve and to help those especially who most need that help. So for me, it's a natural extension of what I do, serve humanity.
Let me ask you about where you studied medicine, because that's a very rich and interesting story in and of itself. You were in Santa Clara, Cuba?
Yes.
As well as Texas in the United States,
Yes.
among other places. Can you give me a sense of how that shaped your worldview? Because there are few people that have probably had that particular experience. As you're learning your craft and learning how to care for people, you're seeing completely different scenarios and how people operate in those scenarios.
Yes, so being in Cuba as a young medical student, Cuba has a socialist system, which means medicine is free. And so it is not profit-driven. It is people-driven. And so that helped to really form me in determining what has become my worldview when it comes to medicine. So I see medicine as a means of serving humanity and not necessarily to make money or the prestige that may come with it. I think after my 5th year of medical school, and I went to do my internship, I applied to go to Haiti to do my internship, because Haiti needed doctors the most in the region. However, I was told that I could not go because I was not a citizen of Haiti, and the program was set up just for Haitians. And I studied with a number of them. When they gave me their stories, I said, I want to go back with you to help. I think that is one of the disappointments that I had. I wish I had the opportunity to go to Haiti to serve them. Then I returned home, where I served as a general practitioner, working in my own country, and then I traveled to get to the United States, especially from Cuba, I had to do these rigorous exams called the USMLEs, United States Medical Licensing Exam. So I did well. And I'll give you a very interesting story that no knowledge is lost. I remember when I was going to my interviews, I met a particular doctor. His name was Richard McCullough, MD, from Australia. He's very well known in gastroenterology, and one of his students was actually a Nobel Prize winner for gastric ulcer. And we stayed in that room. I was supposed to be an hour interview. And he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "I'm from St. Kitts Nevis." And he said, "You play cricket there, right?" I said, "Yes." And he and I spoke about cricket for 50 minutes of the 60 minutes. It's the last 10 minutes that we began to speak about medicine. I guess he had already looked at my CV and so forth. And I said to myself, all those years that my great-grandfather made me stay up 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning watching West Indies versus Australia, Pakistan, India, UK or England, they serve a purpose. And so he called me, he wrote to me 2 years after, and he asked me to come and be a resident with him. And so I traveled to Texas to study with him. And I recognized that there was a different aspect of medicine. In Cuba, it was driven to serve. In the United States, it had what they would call a sort of for-profit approach to it. In Cuba, I never ever remember telling a patient that asking them for an insurance card. I just asked them for your ID to get the name. But in the United States, many times I would hear, this patient does not have insurance, and therefore they cannot receive this treatment. I said, why? What have they done? This is a hard-working person. They just can't afford it. And so that really struck me in a particular way. That here I was in the richest country on earth, and I was telling patients, hard-working people, that they couldn't get a particular treatment because they didn't have insurance. I had a particular solution. I found a social worker in the hospital, and I made friends with her. And I said, tell me all of the scholarships you have, medical scholarships, where people can get help. So every time I get a particular patient, and they can't afford it, I go and look for her myself. I say, I have a patient, they need a surgery, they can't afford it, where are the scholarships? We go through, we look and we look and we look, so that we can find help for our patients. We were not successful with all of them, but I can say that that exercise helped tremendously. The messages that I got from those 2 experiences is that I said to myself, if I ever get the opportunity, I will work to make sure that healthcare is not a privilege, but it is a right.
You talked about Haiti and not being able to go there. You have also been doing work to change the way that we all in the world thinks about the African slave trade. How are you proposing changing what that route now represents, as opposed to the way that we have all thought of it for hundreds of years?
I recently had the opportunity, that is a very important question, to go to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where I chaired the first Africa-CARICOM meeting between the AU and CARICOM. I chaired it with the president of Angola, and our host was the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. And then, if I did not recognize for my whole life that my story, our story, did not begin with the slave trade. It began thousands of years before. So I'm not defined by the slave trade at all. But what I do recognize with the slave trade is that it separated us. If you look at me and you put me on a street in Abuja, you would not tell that I'm not from Nigeria. You would not be able to tell, because we are really one people. And so how I'm viewing it now, that there was a happenstance that separated our people. But the Atlantic was used for separation. It was used for pain. It was used for destruction.
Yes.
It was used to deprive one people to enrich another people. But today, I do not see the Atlantic slave trade. I see the Atlantic Bridge. So my perspective has changed. That all of us in the Western Hemisphere that came across from Brazil all the way up to North America, that I'm saying that it's time that we build that bridge.
Yes.
And that bridge is an interesting bridge. You can go both ways. We don't have to just put it in one direction. We can go over and come back. What does that mean? People-to-people connection, more trade, opportunities for both the African continent and the diaspora to flourish. Let us use what was used for our demise and destruction to now use it for rebuilding to benefit all of us.
Yes.
Of which your country is reaching out to get people to come to the country by offering this incentive that you can become a citizen if you can provide some investment. How's it going, and what is happening with that? How does it work?
Right. So basically, it's called the Citizenship and Investment Program. It was really the first one that was really set up in the world. It started in St. Kitts. So you hear about the golden passport and gold card that is being set up by the United States of America. That actually started in St. Kitts and Nevis, that international program. And what it does, it invites, of course, persons who are investors. They can invest, and if you invest a certain amount after a lot of scrutiny and due diligence check, then you are then invited, after investing a minimum amount, to become a citizen of the country, where you then have to go through another process for that to be bestowed on you. So we seek to have investors who want to invest and help St. Kitts to advance and develop. So we call it Migration Investment, or the Citizenship by Investment Program. The program, of course, has been extremely successful. So now you see other countries and regions around the world really adopting the program. It has had some challenges, which I've had to deal with from the beginning. I said, when I became Prime Minister, I said to the country, this will be my most challenging matter to deal with, because it had become a significant income earner, and because it had been going through some challenges and difficulties. If this is crushed, then you can actually crush the economy at least for some time. And so we have been able to reform it, to restructure it, to get other countries in the region for us to work together and present what we call a unified front in presenting it. So it has come through a challenging time, and it has survived. And I think we are on the last stretch of making sure that regionally we do what is necessary so that we can protect it and it can continue to be a significant tool for development. I will say some of our citizens are some of the persons you would not suspect in the world. I think we have multiple billionaires. We have at least, I'm suspecting maybe one trillionaire who have really invested thus far. We have a lot of persons from the African continent who have also invested through that program as well. And that point is very, very critical. That program has led to other programs being launched in the African continent. I think Nigeria has launched a program, and other countries, even within the Americas, I think Argentina, and some in the Middle East even. But I would say that I've seen a variation that have come from Benin in Africa, where Benin is inviting descendants of Africans in the Western Hemisphere to come to Benin to live for very minimal cost, just prove that you are African descent from the Western Hemisphere. So I want to give a shout out for Benin.
The World Economic Forum says that more than 200 million people of African descent who live outside the continent will soon make up about 25% of the global population. It's a huge number. Do you expect more people of African descent to play a role in the development of your country, and how do you plan on bridging that divide?
The simple answer is yes, and it's started to happen, I would say. A number of things that we are doing. One, the reconnection between CARICOM, or the Caribbean and Africa, St. Kitts and Nevis and Africa, specifically at this time with Nigeria, is giving significant opportunities for people on the continent to recognize that the CARICOM and the Caribbean, St. Kitts and Nevis, that we have opportunities. That's one. Secondly, it gives our people in St. Kitts and Nevis the opportunity to see the African continent and to invest. But not only people in St. Kitts and Nevis who live in St. Kitts and Nevis, but even our citizens who live outside of St. Kitts and Nevis, such as here in New York, Boston, and these cities across the United States of America, who have attained great wealth even, that they too should have the avenue to be able to invest in the African continent. And, of course, invite people from the African continent to invest in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we have set up a trade show, which we did with Nigeria, a group from Nigeria, and I want to thank Aisha for setting up that, who have come to St. Kitts and Nevis. Earpiece, very large. But I want to also go on and really, a friction bank, I can't say enough about President Obama and a friction bank. Woo. Put your hands together. He has established now a branch of the bank in the region, in Barbados. And now they are constructing a trade center that would be a long-lasting institution to connect Africa and the Caribbean through trade. So that itself will give opportunities for persons on the continent to invest in CARICOM in St. Kitts and Nevis, and vice versa. It will give people in the Caribbean region opportunities to invest in Africa. One of the things I would say, there's a Caribbean bank that is established in Ghana. It's from Trinidad and Tobago. So here's a Caribbean bank that now has its branches in Ghana. And here we have the African Bank that now has a branch in the Caribbean and serving all of the countries in CARICOM. So this has started, and the African Bank has been, I would say, a pivotal, force to help to establish this type of connection, which is not only sentimental and historical. Of course, those things are important, but it's also tangible, trade, opportunities to invest, and opportunities for all of us to grow.
Prime Minister, you have mentioned both Ghana and Nigeria, and I don't want any jollof rice fights. I just want to make sure everyone is cool, everyone is good, everyone's okay. No jollof wars. So let me do ask you about what the challenges are for St. Kitts and Nevis. What would you say are your top two biggest challenges that sort of keep you up at night about the Federation?
One, I would say the scourges of climate change, they keep me up because we are on the front line. And secondly, the diversification of our economy away from just citizenship by investment. And I know you asked for two, but I just have to put in a third, because it's important. The security matters within the Caribbean region. We have determined that we are a zone of peace. We have determined that nothing should happen in the Caribbean should lead us to war. Absolutely nothing. And so you would have seen what is happening across the Caribbean region. And of course that is challenging for us, because if war were to break out in the Caribbean, it would hurt the lifeline of the Caribbean, which is tourism. And so to some extent that keeps me up at night. And so we are working tirelessly hard from the CARICOM perspective working with countries involved to ensure that there is no outbreak of war within the region. Very important. The other matter is diversification of the economy. We are dealing with a poly crisis presently. It was post-COVID, where everything stopped and slowed down. A country that depends on tourism, and you can imagine how challenging that was. We also have to deal with the scourge of climate change, which is affecting us on a daily basis. So how do we also deal with that? The new geopolitical paradigm that we are dealing with, where we are seeing shifting taking place and having to navigate that. That is, of course, a challenge in and of itself. So I would say, and the national security matters, which we have had to deal with because the Caribbean too often is used as a region for transshipment of illicit drugs. With drugs come guns, and with guns come all sorts of things, illegal guns. And therefore, we have had to deal with that. So that one, I think we have gotten tremendous success on it. On the one on climate change, we are dealing with that, and also on the matter with security in the region. These three things together, that we call the poly crisis, are things that are affecting us. But let me end this question, or this answer, by saying, with all of this, there are answers, and there is great hope. So I mentioned them because I was asked about them, but I also want to say that we are standing tall dealing with these challenges.
And I do have to ask you about what the U.S. President said. Donald Trump stood up in front of the UNGA and said, the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world was climate change. Are you worried when you hear that from a country the size of the United States that puts out the emissions that it does? You also, of course, he went after China as well. Does that worry you?
I put it this way, at the UNGA, all leaders have an opportunity to speak and to speak freely. And I encourage them to speak, and I respect what they say. I respect the fact that they should be given the opportunities to express themselves and how they feel. What I am focused on is what St. Kitts and Nevis is doing to deal with the scourge of climate change.
Because you're seeing these things firsthand. What are you and your people in, St. Kitts and Nevis experiencing?
So climate change is really beating us. One, we are in the Caribbean, St. Kitts and Nevis, we used to have very pristine beaches. They're still beautiful, but they're now mad with sargassum. Sargassum is seaweed that comes in droves on the beaches, spoil the beauty, and when they rot, they leave a stench. So you're going from this beautiful, pristine, black sand, pink sand, white beaches to a beach that is now covered with sargassum. And the reason for the sargassum is because of the increased temperature of the ocean that's driving that. That's one of the issues of climate change. And we depend on tourism. Our beaches are a big part of our tourism product. Secondly, we are dealing with excess heat. The heat in the Caribbean, of course we are a warm place, but we are dealing with heat that we never had to deal with. Temperature reaching 33 degrees, 32 degrees, you're like, really? And consistently so. And that is affecting, of course, the health of our people, especially our vulnerable communities, such as the elderly and so forth, who cannot really sustain or withstand these extreme heat episodes, and that is affecting us significantly. So the health of our people are being affected. We are seeing more dengue fever because of more heat. So that is also translated into that. The other matters that we are seeing is the Saharan dust from the Sahara. And when the Saharan dust comes across, it causes a lot of respiratory issues to our asthmatics or those who have respiratory problems. So we are seeing these new phenomena that we had not seen until, of course, the advent of climate change. But in addition to all of those things that I just mentioned, look at the scarcity of water. We have now become a water scarce country. We used to have so much water that we used to have pipes free on the roadside. Just go and just take potable water. But now we have to take up all of those pipes because we now have a scarcity of water because of droughts. We never used to experience droughts. We're like, what is that? We have green country, rain falls all the time, we have rainforests. Because now of the sea level rise is infiltrating our underground aquifers, which are a significant source of our water. So we have had to abandon our aquifers, some of them. And now we are seeing more arsenic in our water. And you know, that is very terrible for health, so we have had to abandon them. And now invest heavily in desalination plants. I remember when we were young, we used to laugh and say, oh, they're using seawater to make water. Never thought that would happen to us. But now we're actually we're building desalination plants, which is quite expensive. That money could have been used, of course, for something else. That is at cost of climate change. And the last one I will touch on today, hurricanes. Hurricanes for the direct and indirect impact to the region. We are seeing categories of hurricane that are coming swifter, faster, and so this is one of the things that keep me up. For 6 months of the year, from June to November, I am thinking every day, will we be hit by a category 5 hurricane? Because if you are hit, you wipe out sometimes over 100% of your GDP. It sets you back 10 years because the infrastructure is so damaged. And therefore, we know if we are hit, we go back in time to come forward again. So we deal with that constant basis. That is why climate change is not in a discussion for us. This is something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And those strong hurricanes, of course, result in loss of life, loss of business, loss of communities. So from water issues, to food issues, to direct impact from hurricanes, to your beaches being affected, all of these things are quite expensive and affect our people physically, but also mentally. Psychologically, our people are under more stress because they don't know if they would lose their homes next year or the year after that. They would have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so in a sense, this is very, very challenging for us. But I mentioned all of this, but we have come up with a strategy called CISA, Sustainable Island State Agenda. And that agenda is to help us as a strategy to deal with the scourge of climate change. We are resilient people. We survived slavery, colonization, and have become independent. So just like we battled those things, we are going to battle climate change.
Let us bring ourselves back from the brink of depression after hearing what climate change can do, because you're experiencing it firsthand. I do want to talk about a couple of other things. One of them is cryptocurrency. A lot of people are interested in it, particularly young people interested in it. I know that young people are, we're going to talk about that next, and what you want to do to tell them how to be hopeful and move in this world. But let's talk about cryptocurrency. So, as I've read, St. Kitts and Nevis started sort of this pilot program, or part of it, didn't start, but part of this pilot program to use it as regular currency, just like we would use the dollar in the United States. You would be able to use Bitcoin in St. Kitts and Nevis. What happened with that?
Right, very good question. Of course, we are innovative. We are not afraid to try new things. We have never been afraid. And so cryptocurrency was seen, being looked at as a means for economic development and advancement. It is new. Why not see what it's about? So we started a pilot program to see how it would become, and the term that they use is what you call legal tender, to see how it would be used as legal tender in St. Kitts and Nevis. However, the first iteration that we studied, it was not totally viable, and so we have not pursued it. But I will say that I will never totally take it off the table. Why? There might come a time when cryptocurrency is accepted and you don't want to be left behind. But we are being very prudent with the way in which we approach it.
And let me then ask you about the diaspora, in particular the young folks who are members of this great group and who are descendants, have African blood coursing through their veins. What do you tell young people in this world where we were just having a conversation with Camille that racism still exists, it's still a scourge across the world. Doesn't just exist in one place. What do you tell young people to say to them, you've got a real chance here to improve yourself and the world in which you live?
Right, so I said to young people, first of all, do not allow anybody to define you. You define yourself. This scourge of racism has been around for a very long time. But I will give you a story. My great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, she worked on a plantation that her family worked on in a place called Fountain in St. Peters, where I'm from. That was owned by Ponce de Leon, one of the first governors in the Caribbean region. They were slaves on that plantation.
And just so you remember, Ponce de Leon was looking for the fountain of youth.
Yes. And he thought he would have found it in the Caribbean as well. And that was, in terms of human history, very recent, a few hundred years ago. And today, a descendant of that great who was a slave is now the Prime Minister of that. So that's a message to say to the young people, that do not allow racism or those who discriminate to define you. Yes. We have come from far and we have overcome the worst. Right. And if we have done that, we can do what is left to get us to where we seek to go. Wow.
Terrance Drew, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for being so open and honest about what it is you're going through and what it is you hope for. And congratulations for being a Lifetime Achievement Award.